Well, when you're a keynote speaker, you gotta have a book. So for those of you who are
Mhm.
listening, who are keynoters and who are speakers, I will tell you the market is getting tighter, it's getting tougher, and these are one of the what we call the differentiators, which between presenters that have a book and the presenters who don't.
Hey everyone, it's Melanie Johnson, one of the owners of Elite Online Publishing, where we make best-selling authors. I am here today with Patrick Hardy. He has a book out, and it is called, let me grab the name again. It is called Design Any Disaster. So his book has done amazing things for him, and it's poignant because we've had a lot of disasters lately, I will say. But he's going to walk us through his publishing process. Thanks, Patrick, for coming today.
Well, thank you for having me. This seems like a perfect day to be having this conversation.
It does. So tell me, why did you decide to write a book?
I got on one of the national morning shows, and while I was on the show, I was talking about my approach to disaster preparedness. And some agents in New York were listening to me, and they turned to me and said, "You seem like you have a very unique approach to disaster preparedness, unlike anything we've ever seen before. Would you like to consider writing a book?" And I said, "Absolutely," because I actually love to write. So I said, "No problem. I would love to do it." I'd been running a company for a long time, and I began the process of phasing out my day-to-day work so that I could do more content work and be able to be a writer and get out there more often. And so I did. So they got me a publishing deal, and I started writing the book, and it was a very interesting process. I'm sure we'll discuss it today, and we'll be able to talk to you about it in a lot more detail.
We will. Well, let's start out. Tell me the process, and so you got a traditional
I did.
publishing deal, which a lot of people don't get that or get that opportunity right away, and you get a little bit of an advance. So tell us the process of your writing process and the publishing process.
Well, what I did was I retained somebody who would help me to organize the book because I had a lot of thoughts. Because
Yep.
let me preface by saying this: I've been keynoting for a long time. I've been speaking and training all over the world, and I've been doing workshops and seminars. So I probably had every chapter in my head already, but they were just out of
Yeah.
order. So I had somebody who helped me to design and put it into the right sections and get it into the right
Mhm.
balance. Once I'd done that, and I had a really nice kind of basic outline of how I wanted to do it, I told them I don't want a ghostwriter. I'm not going to do a ghostwriter. I'm going to write this myself. So I took a month off of work. I spent an
Wow.
entire February, and by February, I really mean January 30th to March 1st or 2nd, literally every day, Monday through Sunday, I felt like I was back to Hurricane Katrina again. Monday through Sunday, just working nonstop, typing, writing, rewriting, editing, and got it into a nice spot. And then I had an editor who went through it and said, "This has to be fixed. You got to change this. You got to work on all these things." And I spent the
Yeah.
next 3 months, and that's what I did. Not on the weekends, but during the weekdays. I essentially was writing almost nonstop, getting it right, getting the right stories, putting things in the right order, making sure everything flowed well, having all the stories together,
Yeah.
and then we were done by May. It was a very intense process.
You write and edit, or did you just keep writing and then go back and edit?
No, I wrote and edited. So what I would do is I would write an outline is so helpful, and be for people who are authors here, or you wish to be an author, I would say one of the skills I learned in college that really helped me when I wrote my master's thesis too. I went to
Mhm.
graduate school in Great Britain, and in there, writing
Cool.
skills are so important. Less didactic examinations like, tests and stuff. They really care more
Mhm.
about composition, and that really helped because they said a great outline will go a long, long, long way. And so I did that.
Mm.
And actually, here's a little trick I did. I would have a story, I'd write it on an index card, and then I had a point I wanted to make, and I put that in an index card, and I literally laid them. There was literally hundreds of these, and I laid them all over my carpet, and I literally could pick it up and slide them into place, saying that's how I want that to look, and that story should go there. And I started typing my outline. The outline was easy, and the outline was there. We had to fix it a bit, and then as we were writing, we fixed the narrative because you know how it is. Like, you have to
Mhm.
change the narrative flow. You write it, and you go, "That seems right," and then you go through and you go, "Not quite." That
Right.
has to be refined and changed, and that has to be fixed a little bit. So, each one of those things, and it helps you to understand that stuff. So, yeah.
And it's great that you picked the story. Like I tell authors, you have to have stories in there. It has to be about personal
Mhm,
stories, especially if it's a nonfiction book.
mhm.
It can't just be a redactive of do this, do that.
Right.
It's got to have the story that goes with it and the point of the story. after you tell the story so they get it. It's almost like you're doing a sermon. It's they're telling the story and then the point of the whole thing. So you really had the guts of it that was the perfect formula of what writers do for a book to get people engaged.
And I was really careful because when I was a public speaker, I was a competitive public speaker in high school and college. And what I did was one of the tricks I used to use is I'd have a story in the beginning and I would tie that story back in at the end. If you read my book, I do the exact same thing. I take that story in the beginning and I talk about every single chapter starts with a story. And then at
Mhm.
the end of it, I talk about the implications of it and then how it how it either, they had to learn something or how it improved it or so whether it was positive or I want to use negative, but a time for them to a lesson learned. So those are the
Mhm.
kinds of things I worked with them and said, how can we develop these stories and keep the flow going so everybody so each chapter would be bookended by a story. And every story's in the middle too, but there was that one
Yeah.
narrative that kind of threaded through.
So did you give it out to I don't know if your publishing company did this, did they do we call it like beta readers? Did they give it to a sample audience to, some opinions on it and, do a whole beta reader program, or did they not do that with you?
They didn't. I took the book and I sent it to 10 clients who were trusted and who I
Oh, there you go.
knew would be honest with me, and not people who are
Right.
yes people who would say, "Oh, yeah, lovely." People who said, "I like this, maybe not this as much." And that really helped a lot. And then I
Mhm.
sent it after that, I sent it to 10 more clients, people who I did not know, who had been with our company a while. And we just said, "Would you be willing to do this?" And they said, "Yes." And they would review it and they gave interesting feedback as well. But the publisher didn't do that. But I had but, at the time, I
But
did
you
it
did that.
myself, right? Exactly. Because, for me, I'm so in it that you don't realize, you don't think about it. And it's good to kind of get
Yeah.
other people's opinions.
Yeah, I think that's smart, and I think every author should do that, by the way. If you're writing, you should send it out to a group, and I love that you did it twice even, and they were your ideal audience because they were clients of yours and knew that you'd get good feedback from it. So I recommend everybody doing that when you're writing your book. So what happens next? Walk us through your publishing process and how that
Okay, I'm gonna be pretty forthright here. My editor and I had a good relationship in the beginning, and then there were times where it was really rough because our personalities were really different. And that doesn't mean we hated each other, but we did have some,
Right.
let's call them spirited conversations because we had some disagreements on the direction that it needed to go. I'd say,
Mhm.
I think it needs to have this. He would say, I don't agree. I think it needs to go like this. And we would battle. But he kept me honest. In some ways, that is a good thing. It doesn't have to be we all agree on everything. I mean, it was something that there were things he
Right.
and I agreed on, but I will say that the editing process was a real eye opener for me because it
Mhm.
forced me to think about what is this book going to look like in the end to the audience I'm going for. And this is the first disaster book that's ever been written that was directed specifically to women. Like I didn't write it to a male audience. I wrote it for a female audience because because I
Right.
felt as though there were people and I grew up with really strong women in my life. My mother was a principal and a teacher, and my grandmother was a teacher and a very high ranking principal. My great grandmother was as well. So these are people who are very, very strong and very educated. And
Yeah.
I just felt as though I wanted something where it was strong. And so most of the clients, almost all of them were female because that's my key audience. So I don't know about how other people have done beta readings, but I would say you need to know who this book is written for and then have those people in
Yeah.
your beta group. Those are the ones. Don't pick people outside the beta because they're going to give you the wrong advice. You know what I mean? So that's pretty much how I did it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's very, very smart, and that's one of the key things when we help people write their book, we do a VIP book creation day, and the first thing is who is that target audience? And it's not just women, it's like, "Oh, well, it's women." Well, let's pick a woman. Where does she live? How many kids does she have? What does she do for a living? How old is she? And then you name her. "Oh, her name is Joan." Okay, so then when you're writing the book, well, you're stuck and then you say, "Well, is this story relevant to Joan? Does Joan want to know this?"
Right.
Right? Is this what Joan
And you're
needs
right,
to
and that's
know?
actually what we did. I was being a little colloquial earlier, but yes, we defined it as women aged 25 to 50 with at least 1 child. And the person could be working or non-working, but I never thought of the naming thing. I'm gonna try that the next time I write a book, is actually giving her a name. I never did that. But what we try to do is I
Yeah.
define it the way I did in business. So when I was running my business,
Mhm.
I'd say, okay, I've attenuated this audience to this demographic, right? So, and that
Yeah,
really helped a lot. And so when I was doing that, that really helped to, accelerate the right kinds of edits and the right kinds of
yeah,
feedback. Some stories people said, I don't like this story. And I'd say, okay, then we're going to cut it. I thought it sounded good. But then again, they're really the audience. This is not for me.
yeah.
This is for them.
And even if you pick, like, sometimes it's a randomly named, but sometimes our authors will pick it's someone that they know. Like, it might even be a particular client that you have or a prospective client that you have that you know that person. And then it even gives you that reflection because you're talking just to them instead of, oh, I'm talking to a thousand, 10,000 women that are 25 to 32 and that sort of thing. It makes it much more personal and a personal conversation. So did they let you be part of the cover design? Did you get input in that? The layout, were you able to give input or it's like now they're in control and they did all of that for you?
Well, what we did was with the cover, I was actually traveling, I was seeing clients. And so when I was traveling around, I would give input and say, I think this will work. And I think that this will work. But I said, really, I want something. I really gave them more of a metaphorical concept. I said, I
Yeah.
want something that seems bad, but in
Mhm.
reality is something that is protecting you. And they said, well, what about an umbrella? And I said, that's a great idea. And so they did. So the outside of the umbrella is this kind of black umbrella, and then on the bottom side, it's like clear skies. Because I told them in emergency management, we have a concept. We call it blue skies, gray skies, and black skies. And
Mhm.
so if you have blue skies, it's everything's happy. You have gray skies, it's a disaster, and then the dark skies is like, catastrophic kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So and they kind of took that, and the designer was very, very good at saying, based on what you just told me, here's the kind of concepts that we can come up with. And they came up with different kinds of color schemes and trying things. And I said, this is perfect. But the one thing I did tell them was I said, every other disaster book is red. I want mine blue. And because they were initially said, oh, it's a disaster book, emergencies. It should have red and should have
To be
frenetic
read, yeah.
activity. And I said, no, 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 no. I don't want that. I want something that's blue, that's focus, because blue is the color of focus. It's a color of
Yeah.
focus and getting things done. So that's why I said that they absolutely included me in the process. They were wonderful. They were really great at that.
And you know what I wanna say? I wanna compliment you because the blue and you chose the blue, it does go with your website. Your website is blue, the book is blue, so it's on brand. If it was red, you have no red on your website or no red on your brand. So we always say you wanna be, your book should represent your brand. So that was very smart that you did that. So what would you say are the new opportunities and doors that open to you, and benefits of having a book and being an author?
Well, when you're a keynote speaker, you gotta have a book. So for those of you who are
Mhm.
listening, who are keynoters and who are speakers, I will tell you the market is getting tighter, it's getting tougher, and these are one of the what we call the differentiators, which between presenters that have a book and the presenters who don't. And the reason why it's important is because of this. When you have your philosophy in a distilled form and it's in a clear narrative format where people can read it and they can
Mhm.
say, that's what this person's about. That's the core of what this person is saying, regardless of all the other things that they go off on. This is the core of what they do. That's what's gonna make the biggest difference. And so
Mhm.
that's the thing that made a difference for me. Actually going on podcasts like this, I was actually on an airline podcast, and I actually had a small airline that bought a lot of my books. They saw it and they said, "This is a philosophy we want to adopt in the company. Would if we bought 1,000 books, would you come down and train?" And I said, I'm on the next plane, how is it? It's just really great. So the book really does make a differentiation. Also, it does as well if you plan to be a more public author. In other words, you're
Yeah.
someone who puts on the suit and you go in front of the camera, kind of like I'm doing today. And I've been on a number of TV shows. I was on one this morning. And that each one of those is it's a situation where if they see you've written a book, they say this person is an intellectually sophisticated enough
Mhm.
program that they can actually distill it down into a narrative book, and it really helps because then also people can buy it. They
Yeah,
can
and
read
they
it.
announce you as an author. We always like to I don't know if your
Oh,
hit
sure.
book hit bestseller, but we always like to say, best-selling author, award-winning best-selling author. You have that title every time they announce you, you have that title with it. So that's always important. We do work with the publishing houses to accomplish that as well. And that another thing I want to point out, we always do a little book coaching here. Say a great thing looking at your website and looking at your book, what I would do is tie in because websites for our authors as well, where they can buy bulk books from your website. So you could direct them right there, and then you give discounts for certain amounts. Like if it's, 500 books, they get 10% off, or 1,000 books, they get X amount off. And you can order them and get them right through the publisher, but offer that on your website is great. And then also, since you're a keynote speaker, also have that on your website that they can book you or put a submission form in to submit to hire you as a speaker right on your website. So then when I'm sending people to your website, everything is right there to get all in one place.
Well, I totally agree with you. It's one of the reasons why I opened my website, my personal site, which is disasterpatrick.com. And because this other
Huh.
site I have is my Hytropy site, which is a wonderful business site. And everything you've said is wonderful. And I'm so glad you said it because it tells me that we were not on the wrong track, that we really said the right things. Because disasterpatrick.com has those things where the
Good.
Hytropy site is really more for small businesses. It's my
Gotcha.
traditional business, and contractually speaking, we had investments. So they really very narrowly construed it, but you are completely right. And that's why, and I would look forward, and maybe offline here, we'll talk about it a little bit, because on my Disaster Patrick site, I was so careful to have a page for speaking that says, this is Patrick as a speaker. The next one, here's Patrick on YouTube. Here's Patrick how as an author. And there's actually a couple of things we did not add on the website. And as a result of some of the things you told me here, I'm actually going to probably make some calls
Yeah.
because we're actually updating the website this year. We do it every year, that we're actually in the middle of an update. And so actually doing the bulk sales, we had never thought of that before, because
Mhm.
people were buying them one-on-one, and we sold about 40,000 that way. So, but we wanted to do bulk. And when I do keynotes, sometimes people will buy them in bulk. I'll have a company, I'll say, listen, if I buy 1,000 of
Interesting.
your books, will you do an executive training? And I go, sure, so that really helps. And it kind of puts me in a good position. But that's all great advice. And you're completely right. A branded website makes such a huge difference. If you don't have it, you're really missing out on a lot of wonderful opportunities. You're leaving a lot of money on the table. And it's
Yeah.
more than just money. You're leaving influence on the table. You're leaving a lot of things, a lot of opportunities for you to make the
Yeah.
impact you want to
Because
make.
they might not know, like, I didn't know you were a speaker necessarily, right? A keynote
Mhm.
speaker,
Yeah.
and just talking to you, but if it's on your website, it is. And there's a variety of ways to incorporate your book into speaking fees. So, yeah, they could just buy the 1,000 books, incorporate, but you may say, "Oh, you're hiring me to speak. I'll tell you what, I'll give, signed copies to the first 20 people, and then I'll give you a discount if you'd like to buy books for the rest of them." Or I'll trade my travel out for the books or whatever, because you might already be in that city and this is you're double booking or something. So you can really leverage that. Another great way, Patrick, I would suggest is you can give options on, I think you have an ebook. You have to talk with your publisher because it is different with a traditional publisher. But we recommend that you can do like for a company, you can say, I'll tell you what, I'll give you unlimited downloads for a year of my ebook. Right. So then you're not even having the investment of the physical books, and
Right.
it's an easy done thing for them, and they could give it to clients, they can give it to the people that are working for them or however they wanna use it, and whatever you wanna charge, whether it's 100,000, 50,000, 20,000, whatever it is, and or you give them X amount of numbers of downloads is another great way to do that as well. So just a way to you can do bulk sales, not just for physical. A lot of times authors don't think about the F of it or the EPUB.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. And I think that that's really important. And one of the things I did on my website was I said, listen, if you join my email list, I'll give you the first 30 pages of my book. So that,
Yeah.
but the ebook is a really good idea. One of the things I did do was they decided to do the audiobook. And so they created
Yes.
an audiobook, and they said, we hired somebody who's going to be doing the narration. And I said, then fire him. I said, fire him. I said,
You
I'm narrating my own book. They go, well, we very rarely have authors that want to do that. And they said, it's going to be a rigorous 3 days. Are you ready to do it? They actually blocked out 4 days, believe it or not, and they said, would you be willing to do it? And we got it done in 2 days. I mean, because I know the material, I speak all the time, just like I'm sure many of
Yeah.
you who are listening to this, you've done your material 1,000 times. You know that story. Do you have to read it verbatim? Of course you have to,
Mhm.
but nevertheless, it flows better. And if it's you, it shows it has that tremendous impact. But yes, I think you're right. And one of the things that I think is going to be important, and in this case, because I'm not a known author, I'm a new content creator, is that we didn't rely on Amazon for anything. We didn't rely on Amazon sales. We did everything through private sales, through just like we were talking about here,
Mhm.
keynoting, etc. Because
Right.
nobody knows who you are yet. And then once that happens, then now those book sales will go up. Actually, thriller writer Dan Brown talks about this, how he said, first three books he didn't do anything. And then he had he had one huge book, and all the other books became backed bestsellers, everything behind. So he ended up doing
Yeah.
really well. And then you're in the New York Times bestseller list, 3 different times. So it's really that kind of thing. It's the marketing is so important. I think a lot of authors don't realize that you've got to, just like you've said, everything you've said is wonderful because you have to be so creative to get out there and get your content, your message out there.
Yeah, and you gotta promote it with everything that you do. It's part of your business card, part of your business description, and the audiobook can also be used the same way as an ebook. You can allow so many downloads for X amount of money, so use that as well. That's why I recommend doing all the platforms. It's when you have that, 4 options, you can use it in so many different ways, you know?
Yeah, and I told him, I said, if you enjoyed hearing me for 45 minutes talking to you, now you'll enjoy me for 8.5 hours.
Yeah.
Just got the audio book and I can be talking to you in the middle of the night when you're driving through a rainstorm,
I
whatever.
love it.
You know what I mean?
Well,
And
you
so
sound like you have a book coming out your way. It sounds like to me there's another book in your future. So,
there's gonna be one. The second one is gonna be much more focused on the corporate side. So the first one was really individualized preparedness and laying out my
mhm,
overall philosophy, but the second one will be about corporate and about how to deal with it in the workplace because that is so important. And I believe that it is done incorrectly. And the best practices that I've developed in my 20-year career, things that I want to share with people and saying it doesn't have to be that hard. You don't have to put people in this position. We learned so much in the pandemic. We learned so much during the floods and the hurricanes and the earthquakes and even the wildfire in Los Angeles. There's going to be so many lessons learned that how
mhm.
can we better develop that? That's what I'm seeking to do in the second book. So you and I will have to have a conversation because I got to be a bestseller this time.
Yeah, we'll do that for you, no problem. All right. Thanks, Patrick, for coming. It was wonderful having you. Some really good insight and glad your book has been such a success for your career. See you next time. Remember, if you're looking to become a best-selling author or you are starting from scratch writing a book, we have a VIP book creation day. Just look at our website and conversation. Have a great week, everybody, and keep writing. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
If you want to write a book and become a best-selling author, you're in the right place. At Elite Online Publishing, we can help you create, publish, and market your book so that it becomes a #1 bestseller. We work with a limited number of authors to ensure that they receive the best possible service. So if you want to learn how to write and publish a book that will empower you to smartly grow your brand, business, and credibility, apply today. We look forward to working with you.